Call the meeting to order. Roll call's been taken.
Yes.
Approval of the minutes of our 11/3/16 meeting. Move to approve. Thank you. Is there a second to that? Second. Thank you. Any corrections or changes to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The motion carries. The next item on our agenda is approval of police department bills. Chief Gramza.
Yes, good morning. You have two sets of bills in front of you. One signed by Commissioner Gershman on the 1st of November, the other one by Commissioner Keough on the 22nd of November. The only things I want to bring to your attention, 4J, we had our annual canine recertification. We used to have to take the dogs out of state to Indiana where we had purchased them from. That no longer is the case. We do that in-state, so, but that's an annual recertification. And then on 4N, the purchase of two new squads that we had budgeted for previously. One is a Ford Explorer, all-wheel drive, and the other one is a full-size Dodge Ram pickup truck, four-wheel drive. The prices that we're getting those all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vehicles is about $2,000 to $3,000 less than what we were paying for a two-wheel drive Tahoe. So, yeah, very good, I believe, investment for the vehicle we're getting. The feedback we've received on the Explorer so far is very positive, and we've had two Dodge Ram pickup trucks on our fleet in the Detective Bureau for a while and used as utility vehicles, and there's been a lot of support for those as well. So be happy to answer any questions you have. Otherwise, look for your approval on those bills.
Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Questions of the chief about the bill? I have one. If I'm correct, you bought 3 packets of overtime slips, is that correct?
No.
Who bought 3 packets of, did you buy 3 packets of overtime slips?
Did I? No.
You did? Well, then I'll wait until. Any additional questions? This is a roll call. Myers. Yes. Miller. Yes. Franklin. Yes. Gershman. Yes. Keough. Yes. Motion carries. Now we get to the fire department.
Which is apparently where the question is at.
Yeah, get rolling.
Two sets of bills in front of you, one by Commissioner Franklin, the other by Commissioner Keough. The one thing that I do have to bring to your attention is on page 5C. We did purchase 2 different radios, a UHF and a VHF radio for the new aerial that had to be delivered to the factory. So those were purchased ahead of time a little bit. Other than that, I'll be glad to entertain any questions and ask for your approval.
Well, mostly, well, we need a motion. Thank you. Second? Thank you. Any questions other than mine? I was confused because somebody, and I'll assume it was you, bought 3 packets of overtime slips at $52.33 each for 2, but $52.34 for the third one. Right. Why?
The packets of overtime slips, I think there were like 5 or 6 packets in this, but it's split between the 3 budgets. And to be equal, for it to come out, 1 penny extra has to come out of an account, and that came out of EMS this time.
Thank you for the explanation.
You are welcome.
I had trouble sleeping last night.
Okay, well, as long as it's clear.
Any additional questions about the fire department's bills? Again, it's a roll call vote. Myers. Yes. Miller.
Yes.
Franklin.
Yes.
Gershman. Yes. Keough. Yes. Motion carries. Police Department activities, training reports, and correspondence packet.
Yep, just a couple things I'll bring to your attention. It was a busy month. On the 4th of November, Lieutenant Zeps and I had gone to the Marshall Bus Company. There's a couple new ordinances that were passed, one of them that involved the bus company, and just some challenges that they were having with the new ordinance that the city had agreed to put in place that we had pushed for. It was a good open dialogue meeting, and it's actually one of those meetings that we're going to now start either being invited to or inviting ourselves to on a regular basis, because I think just that interaction between the professional drivers of the community, the bus drivers and law enforcement is good, and that way we can hear concerns that they have. Things that came up such as, there's a couple of areas in town where they feel that there should be crosswalks and there's not, and they worry about, the best interest of the kids. So things like that get brought up that they wouldn't necessarily think of bringing to our attention if we weren't maybe in their presence. But no, it was a good conversation to have with that bus company, and they said that they'd be inviting us back for future meetings. On the 9th, we had our Plain Talk Committee meeting, and although this is on the this is probably a quarterly meeting throughout the department. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that group of individuals who put the Plain Talk articles together that go out to the news media and get posted on Facebook. I think it's just a good public service effort to just keep the community informed, and a lot of what they do behind the scenes kind of goes unnoticed. So I just wanted to recognize that Plain Talk Committee. Going back just a little bit, it didn't make the activity report, but on November 4th, we had a community appreciation event where we were just giving back to the community, and our Marshfield Police Association donated money to purchase burgers and hot dogs, and we grilled those out at the corner of 2nd and Central and gave them away free to the community that Friday night. It was also they had a wine walk going on with Main Street Marshfield, and they also had the holiday open house that night. So a lot of businesses were open later, and I believe we gave away 120 hot dogs and probably close to 150 hamburgers to community members. So it was just a nice outreach event that we had, and we had some hot apple cider as well and waters that we gave out. So the feedback we received on that was very positive. On the 15th, I had attended a recruitment meeting down in Wisconsin Rapids at Mid-State Technical College, and we were just talking about the challenges with recruiting for the profession and some things that Mid-State was considering doing within their police science or criminal justice program. And they just bounced some of the challenges that they're experiencing, from that education or school setting to some of us, some of the police administrators that were at the meeting, and we just did some brainstorming and worked together. So that's a meeting that's probably held every, probably twice a year, that we have that meeting with Mid-State Technical College. And just a handful of, checks that we received, 6H through 6L. I won't read each one, but just the checks that we're receiving from the high school for helping at the homecoming, and a lot of the grants that we're participating in came through. So although sometimes our overtime costs are maybe higher than expected because a grant comes through mid-year that we weren't expecting, that money is getting offset by that reimbursement through those grants. So be happy to answer any of your questions on that. Otherwise, ask you to place those on file.
Questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, we'll place it on file. The next item on our agenda is merit pay policy update and review. And Jen Raku, you are assistant to the city administrator and the human resources
Manager.
manager?
Mm-hmm.
Manager. If you've not met Jen, this is the commission.
Good morning. Good morning.
She's here to help us work through this.
Yeah, so Rick had brought to my attention the fact that earlier last year that the represented employees for the police and fire departments aren't included in our current merit program. And so back in April of 2016, we met with the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee and looked at potentially including them in at that point. Ultimately, the merit program is a program that allows employees to receive a one-time non-base building bonus up to $1,000 based on specific criteria. So whether it's developing new work methods or extraordinary effort or significant cost savings or partnerships, there's a whole list of different activities that might be included for a merit award. Nominees are recommended by either their supervisor, a council member, or a coworker, and then there's a committee that's formed to review those nominations and award grants. So one of the things that the Budget, Finance, and Personnel meeting had brought forward was that they were definitely in support of having a merit program for the represented employees who are currently excluded, but they felt that the budget piece really needed to come from this group. And then also that the review committee probably should also be included from the Police and Fire Commission and appropriate staff to make those determinations if an award is granted. So really what we wanted to do today was to just come to you and see if it would be something that the Police and Fire Commission would be willing to support in terms of financial participation, and then also participation in determining who, if represented employees are included, who would be awarded a merit increase. Our goal would be to just replicate the current city's program.
So Jen, who actually, who would you see actually choosing who's gonna get the merit pay?
Well, right now for the non-represented employees, it's the mayor, the city administrator, myself, the president of the Budget Finance Committee, and then one additional council member. So we could do something very similar and look to have the mayor, the city administrator, myself, Rick and Bob, and then maybe one or two of this group on that committee.
I guess just to add, it's, the merit pay for the city, for the non-represented, occurs right around July, right? The committee meets and discusses those and brings it forth to the finance budget and then city council, I guess, for just their recommendation. And it's once a year, so it would only be a once-a-year meeting, and only if anyone's nominated, I guess, for that merit pay. The other component is just to keep things consistent. The way it's really would be right now, any non-represented employees of the police department would be reviewed by the current group, and then any represented employees would be potentially reviewed by this internal group here, you know, comprised of you guys. So I guess I would bounce it off of you if it would just be best that any merit pay for any employees, in my opinion, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Bob, but any employees from the police department be reviewed by this group, rather than having two separate groups review separate employees. That way, all non-represented and represented employees would be reviewed by the group that's comprised of you, and all of that merit pay would potentially come out of our budget. As far as the dollar amount, the city currently is
It's about $10,000 a year.
for 100 or 200 employees, roughly, 189, 200 employees. So, I mean, we'd be looking at, obviously, far less than that, you know, maybe $3,000, $3,500, I don't know, we haven't really come up with that number yet. But I guess it also depends on how many, we didn't budget for it for 2017, so it would be coming out of maybe some other area of our budget if anyone was nominated for that merit pay. It's something that we could potentially look at for 2018 if it's something that you were insistent on needed to be budgeted for. Otherwise, I guess depending on how our budgets look, we could just decide on what the merit pay amounts would be at that time, which would probably be July, and half the year being done, and having a rough idea of how our budget is.
I would totally concur with what Rick said. The only thing I would want to add is the fact that these would not add anything to the employee's base. It's a one-time payment, so it doesn't, so when if they get any raises in the future, it's not, that doesn't affect it. It's just a one-time bonus per se.
Comments or questions from commissioners?
Would you say you would change the review panel from what the wording is on here then?
Is it the red line version or the one with, yeah,
It says,
what page are you on? The 7A,
7A.
okay. Yeah, what we would do is change it to, yeah, like where it says Police and Fire Commission, one or more representatives, yep. That's what we had drafted and proposed as it relates to, yeah, any represented or non-represented through the Police and Fire would have that,
Okay.
you know, one or more of you gentlemen on it.
Is this a policy that's, is it like use the metropolitan, I mean, municipalities, or is this other departments around the state use this type of policy? Police departments, fire departments, city government?
I think they're not all that uncommon within municipalities. I'm not certain about police or fire departments in particular.
They're not uncommon, or they are common?
They're not uncommon in a city structure.
Currently, all of our non-represented are eligible for merit pay, so any of the clerical staff, ordinance, myself, the lieutenants, the sergeants are all eligible for merit pay, whether they bring to the city some sort of cost savings or they do something of other meritorious value. We're just trying to now include, if there's I guess to think of some examples, there's a situation, I had actually nominated a couple of people for merit pay a year or two ago, and then it was denied because they weren't included in the merit pay system, and these were represented employees. One, it was for a life-saving effort that they had made. Another one was for going above and beyond and making themselves available, in my mind, beyond what was expected of them for calling and for opportunities. So these would be certain, I guess, things that, I mean, I don't think it would be a frequent event, but I mean, it's obviously something that, is stand out and noteworthy.
Who qualifies now under the city policy to get a merit raise?
From the police and fire departments?
No, anywhere.
Really all employees except for the represented police and fire staff.
So all we're doing here is making everybody equal. That, okay.
The city added $10,000 to its budget to support this program.
Sorry, just a longstanding program with the city.
And if we include these additional individuals, there's no additional support from the city for this group. Rather, it comes out of our existing budgets.
Correct. The Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee back in April had requested that we bring it back to this group from a budgetary standpoint, and then to look at the who would be awarded.
Why, if they're willing to pay for everyone else, are they unwilling to pay for these additional individuals?
Honestly, I don't know that they're unwilling per se. It's just that when we brought it forward in April, they requested that it come back to this group
For what purpose?
for approval for the represented employees.
I think when I watched the meeting, their stance was that this group has, although the city council has total say over the bottom dollar of the budget, you have say, of the contents of that budget and sole discretion of the contents of that budget, where the city council doesn't. And based on the volume of employees, because right now that 10,000 would go to support probably 130 employees, 140 employees, adding another 60 would necessitate potentially bumping up that 10,000 to something else. But then I think their thought was, well, since this was a specific group to a budget or from a budget that you guys have total control over, maybe those dollars should come from that.
Doesn't make any difference whether we have control or not. And what they're wanting to do is add a cost to our budget to support a program that they're willing to support with their dollars on an annual basis. I think you know that I support merit programs generally. I'm not sure I'm real pleased with being told, go ahead with it, but pay for it out of your own pocket when they're paying for it out of another pocket for everybody else.
There's another way to look at it though too, Andy, that, maybe they recognize that we're separate from the rest of the city and we maybe they're just asking for a blessing on this. That would really be nice if that's the case. And on the other hand, I've got some questions about it too, as far as, but I think in answer to what you said that, maybe it's just a case of they're asking for our blessing and then we can move forward with it. I don't know if it's, wasn't aware of the discussion with the finance committee, but, hopefully that's the case, that they're just asking us to approve it, and that there won't be anything debated, just they're asking us to come on board with it. I can only hope that that's what they're.
If I understood what the chief said, they're inviting our approval and they want our money. Is that correct?
If anyone would, if this was approved, and if any represented personnel would be in consideration for merit pay, it would come out of the police department budget as opposed to the city administrator's budget, which it is currently, the 10,000, I believe, is currently allocated from.
Just can I ask one clarifying thing, maybe? Just because I'm not overly familiar with this either, but if the non-represented are eligible for it, it would come out of that $10,000 city budget, but if a representative is eligible, it will come out of our budget?
That's the way that it
Okay.
would be, but I would also recommend that, I mean, in my mind, it makes sense, but I would recommend that that all would come out of this budget potentially, so that this group, the group that would select individuals comprised of one or
If
two
it's our
of you
money
would-
and it's our employees, I don't know why we have to involve the city committee at all.
Right. And so that's why I would say represented and not represented potentially come out of our budget and be reviewed by a committee involving you.
I would think that if we're gonna have merit pays, it should be all one fund. I'm not a proponent of this at all, because somebody that's doing their job over and above, and they're working hard at their job, if somebody says, geez, I'm not gonna nominate, Officer Larson, just not gonna nominate him, and somebody else gets nominated, to me, it's not a process that I would back. But if we're gonna, in my opinion, if we're gonna approve this, it's gotta come out of the city administrator's budget, just like everybody else, so it's fair for everybody. And if they need to add some people to the committee, then if they need somebody from the police department, fire department, or the commission, then do that. But it's just gonna cause controversy, in my opinion, so. I would make a motion, if we're gonna approve this, I'd make a motion, it's gotta come out of the city administrator's budget, then we'd approve it.
You're making that in the form of a motion?
Yeah.
Is there a second to Terry's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Nate. If I understand correctly, we have a motion on the table that if we move forward with this, the resources to support it come out of the city administrators or the city's budget rather than police and fire commission budget. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. Anyone have anything to say, want to speak to the motion?
I just wanted to point out again that I think it's a gesture on their part to recognize the powers of the police and fire commission to have say over what our employees do. And I respect that, and I can only hope that that's where they're coming from. As far as where the money comes from, it all comes from the same pot anyhow. And $3,000 isn't gonna break these two departments, so.
It won't, Mike, but then some other department's gonna say, it isn't fair because they've got a smaller group of people to draw from. And if you got, how many in your group?
37.
37, so 80.
So you got 80 compared to what's the total city employment?
About 200 altogether, so about
Okay, so-
120.
The chances of a merit pay increase or a pay is greater, you've got a smaller group to get paid. And that's, to me, that's where the RIF is gonna come from another department, and
So if I can share, last year, for example, was my first year working with the merit program, and we did have $10,000 budgeted. We did look at all nominations that came through, and I think we ended up spending about $8,500 of that $10,000. So it really is based on that nomination, and One of the changes that we had made in the last year is that the increments could be up to $1,000. So it does give you an opportunity to spread that out if you would look to choose to follow the current city program. That way, if we had, 20 people involved, we could determine the amounts on that, on the amount that we have budgeted. So again, last year we didn't spend all of it, but they are pretty uncommon, and there are pretty specific criteria in regard to who would be nominated and for what types of actions.
Also to add, I know one thing that's been brought up in the past was the thought that represented personnel or union personnel already receive certain benefits. So that's why I think historically they were not included in the merit system. I looked at it as well, something performed above and beyond, regardless of whether you're union or not, shouldn't matter. I mean, it should be recognized, and that's why I had brought forth including the union personnel, not exempting them, or excluding them, I should say, because there's many police and fire that do very merit-worthy actions, and to not recognize that potentially in some way, shape, or form, where others throughout the city are being recognized for that, I didn't think was consistent and fair. So that's why when I had brought this forward, I think historically that's why maybe that wasn't included as well. Union gets certain benefits that other non-represented don't get, so, but I'm trying to, I guess, get rid of that thought process, because we're not talking about generalities, we're talking about specific events or specific efforts put forth.
Terry, I keep going through it in my head. My recollection is your language was, if we approve this.
If we're going to, I would approve this if the money would come out of the city budget. Who do you all work for?
So.
We all work for the city, and we should all everybody should be treated the same. It shouldn't be, because I can just see now the street departments say, well, jeepers, they only got 80 people, and we got 80 people, why can't we have our own?
You could argue.
If you work for an organization, your people work for one organization. You're pulled the same rope. I believe that if we got to take, and it's got to go into the city budget, this is a city program. It's not a police department program. It's a city program.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to approve on the condition
Right.
that.
I knew Peggy'd word it right, though, so I was worried about it.
Well, I guess I'm trying to help here.
Appreciate it.
It would be, approve would be conditional on it being part of the city budgeted program.
So can I just ask one question?
Certainly.
So more likely than not, the city's just going to throw it back on us and say, have it come out of your budget. And that, I know exactly what your thought is. But to Mike's thinking too, I think Mike's got a certain point. I think the city thinks it's important enough that we need to approve it ourselves off our budget and also determine who's going to get the merit. I mean, are we better off just revising, some of the language on this, or just throw it back there and just be tossing it back and forth with the city? Because
I like Terry's wording, just because right now, the way it's set up, it would be approved basically by the city, so they're approving line item things for our budget. So it seems odd that, yes, we could have one or two commissioners on it, but essentially it looks more like it's up to the city to make the decision, so they're
Right.
approving their budget.
yeah, but that could be subject to revision where the city, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, we could just be involved in choosing the merit pay for our department rather than city staff.
You could, and quite honestly, you could change the structure of the merit program if you so wished. It was just, we thought it was more consistent if we looked at something a little more level across the board.
We could make our own merit program
We could.
if we want to, separate from the city. Would that change the way you feel at all? I know exactly what you're thinking, because there's going to be inequity between city departments. I completely understand. I'm just wondering if there's a way we can fix it without having to toss it back and forth. Trying to be pragmatic.
You look like you're ready to say something, are you?
That makes more sense to do it one way or another. Right now, it's our budget, but their approval. We should either do it our approval and our budget, or their budget and their approval.
Mike, you look like you're ready. Either say something or explode, I'm not sure which.
No, I'm just thinking, I guess, about the politics of all of it. Not that that is gonna make any difference how if I'm gonna support this or not. I do support the idea, it's been talked about for 10 years, and they're finally getting down to actually giving out merit increases, which is long overdue. Like I said, I recognize this as being a gesture on their part to recognize our authority over our departments. And I guess I don't really care where the money comes from, just so they move forward with it. I think it's just, we can kick this around because of where the money's gonna come from, but it all comes from the city anyhow, so.
Okay. A motion would be to approve the merit policy on the condition that the funding to support it for the police and fire departments come directly from the city. Is that correct? I think we've had adequate discussion. Is there anything additional that people would like to share?
Could we put something in that the commission would actually be choosing who would be getting the merit pay? I mean, not do we want to turn the authority back to the city, or do we want to just have the commission?
We have a motion. You can alter your motion, and then the person.
But I wanted that if we're going to do that, we should have a representative then that's on that committee, because they aren't going to know what they do in the police and fire department.
So is that a second condition you'd like added to the motion?
I thought I had stated, I should have.
Okay. Nate, that's a change to the motion you seconded. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I assumed that wording here was staying that way.
All right. So it includes really two conditions. One is that the funding for it comes from the city. And second, that the committee include the commission.
Representative.
Yeah, okay. Yes, sir.
I guess my only concern with the way that motion is worded is then you're gonna have somebody from City Garage say, well, we do have 50 employees, and why aren't one of us on that committee if one of our employees is being considered? And now wastewater is saying, well, hey, we have.
Who's on the committee now?
It's currently the mayor, the city administrator, myself, the president of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, and then one additional council member.
Oh, then there's no department heads, and I would take that out of my motion then.
Take that out of the motion.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
got
As
that?
long as there's no other department, so we don't.
All right,
Can I just ask one question?
certainly.
If we kick it back to the city, really what we're going to do is the people in fire, police and fire will be competing against the rest of the city, and that's where the fairness issue comes into play. Right, that's what we're talking about. Yeah. I just want to make sure I know where we're going with it. Thank you.
Anything else? Well, it seems to me this is a roll call. Myers,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Franklin,
Yes.
Gershman,
Yes.
Keo, yes. Thank you for good discussion. Approval of restructuring of the police department. Let's see how much discussion we have over that.
We had received an email, I believe on Monday, and it's with a recommendation of a restructuring within the police department to put in a position, to put in a position an assistant chief role, and then what my proposal would be is to change the titles of the 4 sergeants to lieutenant. They've been given, or they have been and will be tasked with additional responsibilities. So, in essence, our structure, rather than the chief, 2 lieutenants who are co-in charge when in my absence, and then 4 sergeants below 1 lieutenant and detective bureau below the other lieutenant. It would be the police chief, an assistant chief, and then 5 lieutenants, 1 lieutenant running each shift, and then 1 lieutenant running the investigative bureau. The budget impact is, in my opinion, minor. We'd be looking at most, a $16,000 budget impact for 2017. And by saying at most, that's with approval of this restructure, the salary survey would then go to our consultants at Carlson Detman, and they would make the decision as to whether or not they felt that where those, I guess, job titles and job descriptions and duties fell into play, and the money that they were, I guess, or where they deserve that. So I guess I'd be happy to, without reading this verbatim, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, what I'm looking for is approval of a restructure which would put in place an assistant chief, somebody solely in charge in my absence, and then changing the titles from sergeants to lieutenants across the board. We do have internal interest. I spoke with our 2 current lieutenants. We do have internal interest in the assistant chief position, so this is nothing we would, in my opinion, have to go outside to pursue an individual. We have qualified candidates within the organization. And this isn't adding a person, it's just changing, I guess, changing titles of some. As far as the sergeant's title being changed to lieutenant, this, they would not have to reapply for those positions. That would just be an automatic change, so there wouldn't be the challenge of that. But what you have in front of you then is my summary, the budgetary impact for 2016, and the new job descriptions, which A, needed to be updated, and B, because of their format, but then B, it includes various other responsibilities and tasks that they will be, that they would be assigned.
So let me be sure I understand what's in front of the commission. You're asking that this structural change be approved by the commission at this meeting?
Correct.
I suspect that's going to require a motion for us to discuss.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
Second motion.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Andy, can I make a comment here?
Sure.
There's a downside to this restructuring, and I fully understand why they're doing it. When you create that assistant position and you move it up a pay grade, you create an inequity over at the fire department, where by state statutes only allowed 1 level underneath the chief. We couldn't duplicate this type of a structure and then not have inequities in our upper level. So there will be inequities brought about by this simply because of that. And I don't see a way to make, to bring them back to something equitable between them. So there will be some backlash from this. And I'm not trying to tell you how to structure this department at all. I'm just telling you what the ramifications of this restructuring do to my department.
And yours is by statute, is that right?
Mine's by statute. It's all based off of whether we have 1 station or more.
And I can tell you, based on our comparables, more departments have assistant chiefs than don't have assistant chiefs, departments our size. So this would be falling in line to what I have seen as the norm in our profession. So there's 80 to 90% of the time a number 2, a specific number 2, and they're usually called a captain or an inspector or an assistant chief or a deputy chief.
It seems to me that there are at least 2 levels of issues to consider, and one of them is what's best for the police department. And once we decide that, then we can deal with what the effect would be on our other department. But let's begin the discussion by talking about whether or not this, to us, makes sense for the police department.
Question, was this way before?
This way?
Or it was, yeah, having an assistant chief in 97?
Yeah, prior to 97, we had an assistant chief. It was removed based on needing additional bodies when we went to the 12-hour shifts and the focus on restructuring without demoting anybody, I guess, so to speak. So it went by the wayside when we needed more individuals on the road at that time. We've since hired more individuals, and I mean, we're appropriately staffed on the road when we're at, full staffing. But yeah, prior to 97, it had been that way. Going back as far as I know, there had been an assistant chief in that second in command role.
Other comments or questions? Mike?
Yeah, if we move these positions up to lieutenants and not sergeants anymore, are we taking, and with it comes some extra duties that are outlined in this memo, are we taking away from the time that the sergeants are working on the road?
What was that last part?
I mean, ideally, well, if we move them up to the lieutenant position,
Yep.
give them the extra duties that you outlined in here, is there a potential of taking away from the time that these sergeants are now working on the road?
I don't believe so. I think the assignments that they'll be tasked with, some of them are already doing them. We have somebody who's kind of in charge of the social media and public information officer thing, so they're already doing that. They've been tasked with that for probably about 2 years now. We've had a sergeant that's in charge of the SWAT team. Although there's tasks to be done throughout the course of the year, I mean, there's monthly trainings, and they just oversee that training when they have time. Their first and foremost responsibility is to the day-to-day operations and the safety of the city, and supervising their patrol officers would be primary. The things that we're recommending, like I said, are either things that they're already doing or things that would not task them so much to where it would take away from that. They currently have a number 2 on their shift as well. So, I mean, when they are full staffed, some of those duties of supervision of the patrol officers could fall on that lead officer, that current lead officer, if that sergeant or lieutenant needed to then put some time towards the FTO program, or maybe doing some things towards auxiliary, or recruiting transport or park patrol officers. So I mean, there's a time and a place, but that would be secondary to their primary role of supervision.
So how long after the dust settles with all the restructuring are the lead officers going to be brought up and recommended to be sergeants?
Well, I don't see them ever leaving the union in that perspective, although I do believe in supervision not being union. So I don't believe union should supervise union, but at no time I guess I haven't even considered that.
Additional questions or comments?
What's the main issue, fixes or improves in the department, creating a position and changing the other positions?
I guess it's there's a couple different things. It puts, like I said earlier, number 2 in charge in my absence. There's a lot of things that an assistant chief would be tasked with. We're considering pursuing accreditation, and that's a lot of responsibility. That's probably a 2 or 3 year commitment just to have an accreditation manager in place and to just be considered one of those 5 to 10% agencies that has the stamp of approval from both a national accreditation standpoint and a statewide accreditation standpoint. They would be tasked with maintenance of our policy manual. They would be tasked with supervision of other programs. They would be probably our main department's grant writer. A lot of those things are currently falling on me right now, and I feel like I need some help with that. To have one individual that would focus on that would be a great assistance for myself. As far as the lieutenants, sergeants being moved to lieutenants, I see that as helping with some of these responsibilities right now, like field training officer, supervisor, unified tactics coordinator. These are responsibilities that are falling currently on patrol officers. So it's in fact taking them off of the road at times to do these duties and these works. And I feel if we put these on that supervisor and they do that in their off time, in fact, they're to an extent at-will employees to where they could work, if they choose to do some of this off-duty, there's no need to compensate them with overtime. Not that I would encourage that, but I would encourage them to do as much of it on duty as they can. But they're exempt employees, so if they couldn't get some of these duties done, and it's not my goal to overburden them by any means, but it's also my goal to make sure that the patrol officers are spending as much time outside of this building and out on the streets as possible. One other thing it does is it, I guess, builds a little bit of a gap where there's, I guess for lack of a better word, some closeness in pay rates right now. We're in contract negotiations with our union personnel, and they've brought it to the attention of the city that they're currently 4 to 11% underpaid as it relates to their comparable departments. Well, if that, say, a 7 or 8% wage increase would occur for the union, that would make some more senior patrol officers being paid higher than our current starting sergeants. So we would have individuals in a management role being paid less than those that they're managing. So by bumping them up to or by increasing their salary, if the salary consultants agree with this, it would build that, put a little bit more of a buffer in there and make it more appealing for somebody to be a manager and to supervise, because it would, I guess, give a little bit more of that gap between where the patrol officers are being paid or the detectives are being paid and where the supervisors are being paid. I think there needs to be a little bit more of a gap because of that, I guess, for lack of a better word, wage compression. They're that closeness in how much they are. So there's many reasons why I think that this is beneficial.
Could be total budget impact of 16,000 plus the other position of assistant chief?
Nope, that includes the assistant chief position.
Oh, okay.
And that would be for the 2017 budget would be, at most, I see it being that based on that. And how I put that is, rather than doing this all at once, if most of our current sergeants are at their midpoint or at their 100 percentile as far as what they can make. They could make more. The city just doesn't have a way to get them beyond that right now. They're going to work on that this year. So they're really pretty much at their max, our sergeants are. If the salary consultants agree and they would move up to that lieutenant pay rate, I would put them at a step 2 instead of a step 4 so that they're receiving an increase, but now over the next 2 years, they would receive additional increases. So it's a gradual increase up to that midpoint of the lieutenant's pay rate, rather than just moving them from a step 4 and a sergeant up to a step 4 and a lieutenant. So it would be less of an impact to the budget, but yet still an impact to the individual, I guess, as far as wages go. So yeah, at most I see it being a $16,600 impact to our budget, which I have no concerns about absorbing throughout the course of the year. I know that we're already going to be with something we're talking about next, being Sergeant Paschal's resignation, or retirement, I should say. His replacement, he'll be leaving at the end of this year. His replacement probably won't be on board as far as hired until February or March. So right there, we're saving 1 to 2 months of a sergeant's current pay rate, which will probably cover this amount that we're looking at right here. So that doesn't concern me, that slight increase.
Terry, any comments or questions?
I'm not saying that it isn't something that we should do, but I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of questions yet. And I apologize to the commission. I got it Monday and I traveled the next 2 days and I didn't do a good job reading it. I understand what you're doing, but I know you say it's it's only $16,000, but today we gave away just shy of 20 grand. And 16 here, 16 there adds up to real money. And I want to be sure what we're doing, you know, how does it affect? And I'm reluctant to say that because now all of a sudden, the thing I don't want this commission to do is become a bunch of micromanagers of your departments. But I don't fully understand, you know, the structure and what are people gonna be doing. And I think where Commissioner Meyer is going a little bit is, and this happens in the business world today, we become so involved in administrative, we forget about the work that has to be accomplished. I can, you know, I see this all the time. You become an administrative person and you don't become an officer anymore, or you don't become a firefighter anymore. You become a paperwork person, and I just want to make sure that.
And this isn't adding any more administrators. This is changing titles within
I know
administration.
that, but for me to vote yes for this today, I got to digest some more, and I apologize that I probably should have called you yesterday when I got back and it got so offline, but that's where my thoughts are on it.
Randy, haven't heard from you.
Well, I'm kind of trying to soak it all in. I think conceptually it makes a lot of sense, but I think I would like just maybe, I think, Terry, what you're looking for is just trying to get a little bit more detail and actually, you know, the only thing I worry about is things that we don't know, the unintended consequences, and I'm not alluding to Chief Hate's comment, but you know, there probably should be a little bit of examination to it.
What I'm hearing, and I don't want to read a consensus if there isn't one, but what I'm hearing from the commissioners, my interpretation is that maybe we need to delay this for a meeting at least, some opportunity to talk individually with the chief, sort out additional questions we might have, give those to the chief in advance, but not do anything with this today.
I would support that, Andy. I really would. And don't get me wrong, I'm not picking on you about 16 grand, but I just think, I really,
Well,
I don't like to vote on something and say, well, I voted on it, just push it away. I want to make sure what we're, and I can see the situation, I can, but I would like a little more time to talk about it. And we could talk offline, you know, one-on-one with you so we have a better understanding.
I would ask the commissioners between now and our meeting in January to connect with the chief and make sure that you have an understanding that satisfies you about this proposal. And what we will do then is leave this for now. Chief Haight brought up a second issue having to do with the effect on the fire department. I think maybe Chief will leave that until the next meeting, and in the interval, again, you might want to connect with the commissioners and talk about what that means and what the impact would be, because I don't think we understand that fully either. So.
Rick, when will you hear from the consultant in terms of the salary responsibility study?
Well, I wasn't going to send it to the consultant until I had some support from this group initially. It could take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to hear back from the consultant. And I guess if there's any, I don't want to say urgency in this, but if there's any hopes of, you know, I guess at the latest having a decision made by the next meeting, it's, you know, we're going to have one of these positions that's impacted by this be available for promotion with the retirement of an individual. And the sooner we can get that process in play, and how that impacts this is somebody may not pursue this based on the current pay rate, but they may decide to pursue it. I guess as an example, we have some detectives with a little bit of overtime are making really what a sergeant makes right now. they're working Monday through Friday. A current sergeant works weekends, holidays, nights. So it's not really appealing currently for a detective to go to the sergeant's position based solely on the pay because of the other, I guess, negatives being, now having to work weekends and holidays and nights. Where you might have some of those individuals apply for this. So I don't want to delay our promotional process too much. So yeah, I
We'll-
look forward to meeting with you guys
Yeah.
and having a decision made by the next meeting.
Yeah, we'll leave it to the next meeting and see where we come. I have a quick question. If the consultants say no, can we do it anyway?
As
Why are
far
we
as-
so tied to the consultant?
I don't know that, the consultants wouldn't decide whether or not we change the title of sergeants to lieutenants. The consultants wouldn't decide whether or not we put in place an assistant chief. What the consultant says is, okay, based on this job description you gave me, we say it's classified at this pay rate. We can dispute that and such, but ultimately, from what I'm told, that pay rate then goes to finance, budget, personnel for approval as a pay rate classification for that job title, because they've historically, I believe, have, and maybe Mike can answer that a little bit better, but they've historically made the decisions as it goes to pay rates. It's still a little foggy for me too, because I would think that this group would be able to have some say into that as well, and if they felt that this was deserving of a certain pay rate, that would come into play, because again, it's coming out of our budget, and a lot of the things that the Finance and Budget Committee wants to do is put things back on us, such as that merit thing, but then they still want to maintain, I guess, a certain amount of control over those things. So I guess I'm confused over that part too, but
All right, that's fine.
potentially, this group could decide that.
That's good. Mike, have you got anything to add? No? All right. Let's go on to item 9 on our agenda, accept the police sergeant's Peschel's retirement.
Yes. Sergeant Nick Paschel has been with the department for over 27 years. It would be 28 years in February. He's decided to retire after 40 years in the profession. He had worked in various departments within Clark County prior to coming to Marshfield, and has also had some military experience. So I guess I would ask you to accept Sergeant Nick Paschel's retirement effective December 29th of this year.
Motion?
Motion to accept with regrets.
Second to the motion.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments? Please convey to the sergeant that the commission appreciates his long contribution to the safety of the city.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion? We'll do a roll call. Myers?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Franklin?
Yes.
Gershman?
Yes.
Keo, yes. Motion carries. Replacement police officer, you're taking up the day here. Let's
I'll talk fast.
let's get on
With Sergeant Paschel's retirement, we would have a vacancy, and I look for approval to fill that vacancy. Currently, with our hiring process, we accepted applications. We have testing, because we still have one vacancy with the resignation of Officer Schley. So we'll be filling that vacancy, as well as, if approved, Nick Paschel's vacancy. We have a testing set up for the 17th of December, interviews set up for the 21st and 22nd of December. And then I would bring forth names to this group and a possible interview from this group on those finalists for, I guess, hire into early 17. But I look for approval to replace Sergeant Nick Paschel.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion? Our parliamentarian says this does not require a roll call. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Did you know we had a parliamentarian?
Yeah.
Approval of Police Department budget resolution for body cameras.
Yes. 2 years now, we've budgeted for body cameras. Both times, we've had to take that out of the budget. This is something that that I know that council members approve of and support, having body cameras on our police officers. This is something that I know that members of this group support. It's a trend in the profession. We have money in our budget this year to make this purchase based on being down one officer for a good chunk of the year, based on some other fiscally responsible, budgeting throughout the year. Right now, we're at about, a $300,000 surplus in our budget. Some of that is fuel costs being lower than anticipated. Some of that is, like I said, wages, other areas that, we were able to save money. So what I am asking is for approval to make that purchase of the body cameras through this budget resolution. We would then bring it forth to the Finance, Budget, Personnel, and City Council for approval. Initially, when I had written this into our budget, I had planned on buying anywhere from 15 to 20 body cameras and having the officers share it. The more research I've done, departments are assigning body cameras to each individual officer. We had a body camera committee comprised of a handful of officers, and we had met numerous times and discussed policy, discussed testing and evaluation. It came down to 2 cameras that we liked. They're both buying 40 of these cameras. The bids came in within $46 of each other. So the one that I am recommending that we go with is the one that is the same brand as our in-squad video cameras, and it syncs with our in-squad video cameras. So it'll be, I'm hoping, a clean transition into those body cameras that would be, assigned to each officer. The total budget amount would be, the resolution amount is $54,503. What that does is it buys us 40 body cameras. It also gets us the charging and docking stations within the vehicles and inside the station here, and all of the, peripherals needed to make the cameras work with our in-squad cameras.
You make a motion. Just got a motion. Do we have,
Wait a minute, a motion.
I make a motion to approve the
Second.
budget resolution.
We have a motion, we have a second. Now we can have discussion.
Here's my question.
I've got a parliamentarian who's gonna,
okay, thank you. Hey, do we have a body use camera policy? And the reason why, because I don't
That's what you're
remember-
looking at right there.
Yeah, because I
That's
don't.
our body use camera
Okay,
policy.
because we haven't approved it yet. Because I was thinking, did I miss a meeting that we didn't approve it? 'Cause part of the concern I have is not the cameras. I think we'll all for that, but I want to know when they can turn it on, when they can turn it off, who's going to have access to the tape,
Yep.
how people can request it. I mean,
I've told the chief, I don't care if he's got them sitting behind that door. They're not to be used until we approve a policy.
yeah, that's the only concern I have, because I want to be able to point to something and say that we're following some rule. And obviously, you're going to have to train staff on appropriate use of it or non-use of it, especially in different
That's all included
situations.
in the policy, but there is a policy for those body cameras within that, our new policy manual, which will be handed out today.
Okay, all right.
Again, our parliamentarian says we do not need a roll call for this. All in favor of the motion signify, excuse me.
If we're gonna be storing all that data on their words, all that getting stored, and it's gonna add a lot of expense as well.
The city's already budgeted for additional space on their server. We have, I can't remember exactly how much, I think an additional 20 to 30 terabyte was purchased for this purpose. It was actually purchased last year, anticipating we were going to buy them this year. We had to remove those out of our budget with some budget restraint issues. We again removed it out of our 2017 budget because of some the tax levy freeze and some needs to cut things out of our budget. The city administrator supported purchasing these out of this year's budget if we did have the money. So I guess, but yeah, that space, that storage space has already been allocated and is already waiting for us at IT.
Our parliamentarian has changed her mind. We need a roll call here. Myers.
Yes.
Plot. Miller.
Yes.
Yes.
Franklin?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Carried. The next two items on the agenda, it looks to me, are also yours. Let's just,
Speed reports, I don't have them for you. I
That's
figured
good,
that we
that's
would be
done.
cutting things too close, so
that's
I'll
done.
bring speed reports next time.
dissemination of the updated policy manuals will be done at the end of the meeting, and we'll talk about it. You all have to, commissioners, you gotta read them between now and when we meet in January.
And what I would just add to that is,
2013 excited.
the Lieutenant Zeps tirelessly worked on this manual, along with other staff within the organization. It was quite a venture, pursuing this rewriting of our policy manual and getting it up to a standard that is supported by a group of attorneys and a group of law enforcement administrators throughout the country. So what you have in front of you is probably the best policy manual out there, and that's why many agencies across the state and across the nation use this company. Up to you whether you want to read every single policy verbatim. Many just pertain to our operations and how we handle things.
Chief Graham, so-
Some don't include this group, but I support your reading as
You don't
much.
need to tell us our obligations. We
I support
understand
your
what we're
reading as
supposed
much
to
of it
do.
as you're able to.
I'm all in favor of taking them to lunch. How much time do you have?
Sounds good to me, anyway. Chief Haight, you've got about 2 minutes, hurry up.
I can do it relatively quickly. A few things to bring to your attention. Page 14A, we did have Marv Stroman, who is, his daughter was a firefighter for a day with her kids. It was kind of she wanted to reconnect with her dad, and it was her birthday, so we kind of put together a firefighter for a day for her and her 2 children, and that was really well received by her. And so I think it was kind of nice to give back. And so that was a great thing that we did. Pages 14B and C, we did receive Alzheimer's training for all of our shifts by Stony River Memory Care. That was really well received. 14C also, notice that our Keep the Wreath Green campaign, which is a Wood County endeavor, is started again on Thanksgiving and will go through New Year's Day. And as of this time, we have 1 red bulb on the reef. So Vesper had a shed fire that took down a 3,100 square foot building, so. And then page 14D, we did a presentation to the Chile Fire and First Responders Departments. It was kind of a run them through our ambulance, show them where things are, what we have, as well as bring them up to speed with some of the newer equipment we have. And then they did sit down and they worked together as a group. You know, how do we streamline our communication between that? How are things going on scene? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? How to do that? So that was really well received. And both departments seemed to take great enjoyment in it. Quick thing to bring to your attention, ambulance revenue. We have already exceeded our budgeted amount by almost $100,000 for over last year. So we'll probably be looking at maybe $250,000 over by the time we get done with December's, give or take, just to let you know that that's still continuing on. And then we have 2 very nice letters, one from the Stony River thanking us and really, kudos to our personnel for the interest they took in the training. And then one from a patient of ours who credits our ambulance with saving his life, and he's very, very appreciative, and it was a very, very nice letter. A very nice talk with him, and then I passed that on to the crew as well. Just ask that to be placed on file. I'll be glad to answer any questions you guys have.
Any questions of the chief?
Sorry, I went over the 2.
Oh, no, you're, actually, you win today.
What?
You win. Review, last item is review of Police and Fire Commission meeting and financial review schedules. They're in your packet. If you have any conflicts or problems with that, check in with Peggy. Are there any other additions there?
It'll be under 20 seconds. I will be absent if we hold the meeting for next January on the 5th, 5th of January. So I'm asking the 12th of January if we could bump the meeting back 1 week. to January 12th instead of January 5th.
Would that inconvenience any of the commissioners? 12th. We'll try and make it on the 12th. Is there any additional business to bring before the assembly? Thank you, gentlemen. We had some meat today. We're adjourned.